This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. The Huskies Warming House podcast is also brought to you by the Soda Pod, home of MNCAA college hockey news and more. Stay wild and up to date with new episodes throughout every week. Find them on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other podcast platforms. And welcome into the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 181 here in the den. Nick Max and Noah Grant here in the first week of October. Nick, and hockey season for both squads in St. Cloud officially around the corner coming up this weekend. Men's team gets underway. Women's team gets their first taste of hockey in October underway. They already had a great sweep 2 weeks ago against Union, had a week off to debrief that, and now we are officially into the hockey season. I would say it feels like we're actually on schedule, so to speak, which the Huskies Warming House podcast has never really been on schedule. So I don't know.
Especially from the host, but that's okay.
You know, I'm here. Funny enough, we were just talking about this pre-show. For those who don't know, by the way, because I'm sure a lot of people picked up on the fact that we did have some pre-recorded segments and things from the summer. And yeah, definitely had to. And for me, if you don't know this, if you're new to the show, which I can't imagine many people are, but I am a night shift nurse. So we are recording this at 8:00 at night. And I've just woken up, for example. So yeah,
let's be honest. It's not you're the nurse. You've had nursing care, and because you're stuck on some substance like Red Bull or some other crap. Let's be real.
Listen. If there's anybody that's a candidate for anything nursing, especially related to a nursing home, I think we know who that is on this show. I'm just
nursing home. Oh yeah, Caleb JP buddy.
You know, funny enough, you want to talk about a nursing home move here. My dad is he just turned 60 not too long ago, and so Nick, you'll get there in like 3 years.
2.
we were actually up at the lake on my weekend off, and we stopped at a gas station up at the lake, and we're grabbing some beer and stuff like that, and we go in, and it's me, my dad, and the dog, and he jumps out to go get some beer, and I'm like maybe I'll get like a couple candy bars or something, something like that or whatever. So I jump out with him. We go up, and we pay and whatnot. Come back out to the truck. Can't get in the truck. Keys are in the truck.
Oh no.
Dog had jumped up on the side of the little railing and had because it's like a 2016 Chevy Silverado. Yeah, had hit the lock
10 years
button.
newer than I would expect any other truck to be in North Dakota, so that's good.
In typical dad fashion, though, the dog locks us out, and the first thing my dad does is he turns to me and he goes, "You locked us out, kid." I'm like, "No, I didn't." What are you looking at me for? I'm probably still a kid at heart, but I'm almost 27. I'm like, we can probably dispense with the kid thing at that point. But
right.
Yeah, so that was tough. Luckily for us, we were about 5 minutes from home, thankfully, not like down in town. So it was a pretty quick pickup for us. But yeah, we were sitting in there, and the gas station attendant was absolutely rolling because we're like, "Can we use your phone? We don't have our phones. The dog has them." So of course we're watching the dog, and my dad has like a container of like Carmex chapstick on the thing, and he starts like chewing on the thing, and we're like, "Hey, like stop doing that," but you can't get in the vehicle. So it was an interesting ride.
I wonder if the dog was trying to get, that backdoor poker game set up, and you figured, you know what, just going to do it here in the truck. And I mean, it's possible.
I
get him at the gas station. Perfect.
The best part was, so our dog's name, we have a Springer Spaniel. He just turned 2. His name is Scout. And he's just sitting there in the driver's seat, all like, I don't know what you guys are looking at me for.
Why aren't you guys coming in? Like,
yeah.
why do you keep banging on the windows?
Yeah, innocent until proven guilty, apparently. But, that is not the case for the Huskies Warming House podcast. We are definitely guilty of having a way different poll than NCHC Media Day did.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about that. We did much better on the WCHA side, their rankings, obviously. So we'll touch on that too, as well as
say that these polls are going to be right. That means we'll just be equally off when it happens.
Yeah, we were right in line with the NCHC last year, and look how that turned out. Besides the top 2 teams. Maybe it is. I'm not sure. And what I can tell you is a good thing is this is the week where we get to preview St. Cloud State on the women's side here in the WCHA. We have them finishing 5th in the conference, as do our quote-unquote peers at the WCHA as well in their poll. So we'll talk about St. Cloud in all their glory in our second-to-last preview before the season here on episode 181. We start, as always, with Center Ice View News and Notes presented by the Soda Pod and HuskiesIllustrated.com.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Welcome into the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 181. Nick, Max, and Noah Grant here for another week in the den. And Nick, starting on the men's side here, NCHC Media Day, another good one, as always. Probably one of our favorite days of the year. It really a chance to, I would almost say maybe the culmination of our NCHC previews in some senses, where it's like we get to talk about these teams. If you haven't figured it out, we obviously don't follow every single one of the teams as extensively as we do our St. Cloud State Huskies. So we're not,
You don't say.
we're not privy to everything that goes on. If you are a listener from Denver or CC or Duluth or what have you, although if you're Max Veach, you're probably complaining about everything related to
the
Duluth
refs
in
are in
general.
this conversation, so he's got nothing.
No ammo for him.
No, nothing.
No ammo for him, but it is a great chance to hear from, various team head coaches and captains and players and things like that, and kind of get a scope of, we've talked about our perceptions from the St. Cloud side related to all these other teams. Now, how do they really perceive themselves and what do they expect for the upcoming year? So, Nick, I guess before we get into the rankings and kind of our highlights for the day, this is your 10,000th NCHA Media Day, it feels like now.
Getting close, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what does that day kind of mean to you? Because obviously every year it's something that you have circled on the calendar and make sure that you try to make it if you can.
It sort of starts the season, right? That to me is, kind of what it means. But more so, to your point, it gives us an opportunity to sit down and kind of get intimate with the coaches and the captains, right? Kind of pick their brains a bit, talk about what they're excited about. The good news is when you have everybody under one room and everybody has the same winning percentage, it makes the conversations a lot easier, which is nice. But more so, you can sort of get an idea of where the coaches are at, and, obviously some names pop up, but, I think, reading the tea leaves and sometimes in between the lines, right, you get a sense of, what they're anticipating as far as a strength, maybe some things they'll see as a challenge. And some reflection time too. And I think that's the best part about it, is you get to kind of be a little bit more open with these coaches and captains, because really after that day, it becomes a lot more difficult for these players and coaches to kind of get a little bit more open with you. I know it becomes a little bit more of the the standard Q&As. So it's a nice time to sort of kind of get more in depth with them and to kind of pick their brain of where they think they're going to be.
Yeah. And it's a lot more fun to, for lack of a better term, have that conversation. Again, we're going to preview, obviously, our St. Cloud teams in the next 2 weeks to cap off 16 total previews that we do. And when you get through the first 14 and, it's kind of a one-sided conversation, so to speak, if you want to quote a Minnesota native and Kevin Kling, if anybody knows who that is, it's a little bit more fun being able to talk back and forth about a team and kind of get their aspects of what they think. As far as what we thought here for the season, on the NCHC side, we had Denver at number 1, St. Cloud at 2, Omaha at 3, Western Michigan rounding out the home spots at 4, then North Dakota, CC, Duluth, and Miami rounding out our bottom 4 here. The NCHC media poll was much different. So in comparison to ours, like we said, starting from the bottom, number 8 Miami garnered 28 points in the NCHC. We also had Miami at number 8. Unfortunately, that Redhawks program just a little bit left to be desired, with kind of waiting for them to kind of turn a corner again and find some success. Question mark is, can they finish higher than 8th this season? And can they get out of the basement next year and avoid that spot, or even number 9 when ASU enters the fold next year? So,
yikes. Yeah.
I guess no 28 points. I mean, a full, what would that be? 71 points shy of the next place team in 7th. That's tough.
That's rough. And we've talked about it, right? There isn't an easy answer for this program, right? I know that a lot of attention is paid to Chris Bergeron, and, are there challenges that Miami's facing in terms of recruiting? And, is there something more, at the helm there? Of course, we don't know, but let's just say this. I think it's fair to say this, Noah. And again, we're not trying to disrespect the program or Chris Bergeron by any stretch of the means, because mind you, before Chris Bergeron was at Miami, he had a hell of a career actually with Bowling Green, right? So, I mean, he was a respected name. You just kind of wonder if he's maybe handcuffed a bit. We have to question that a bit. But to your point, what an outlook from a fan's perspective to think that if you are a Miami fan or you're watching the NCHC and seeing the year after year struggle with these Redhawks, to know that what you're trying to achieve is not go lower, right, for next year, right? And again, and here's some of the in-between stuff, right? You kind of wonder from a fan's perspective, if you're looking at this with Chris Bergeron, right, is it really all him?
Right.
And for him, we thought that maybe his job was on the hot seat last year. I would have to think it has to be this year. But again, with Miami and, some of the circling rumors, and, we won't get into all of it, but the perception, I think, is out there that there's maybe more than just the head coach that is kind of handcuffing this program. Again, hard to know for sure. We don't know all the answers. We're not going to pretend that we do, but it sort of gives me that vibe. I don't know if you feel the same way, Noah, but it feels like they're spinning their tires, or should I say this? Maybe it feels like they're not even pushing on the pedal anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd thing. It's weird. It's almost that I almost envision a fishing rod with a set of handcuffs coming from the southern part of Arizona up to Ohio. Is that? You're
triggering their athletic director from Miami.
Well, ASU was certainly a weird little side story for a team that really didn't need any extra side story. They need to get back on the high horse and make some noise in the NCHC. And right now, they haven't really put themselves in a position to do that. And it seems like even with their lack of success, with the mass exodus that we've seen from players and groups in the past couple of years, you have guys that for lack of a better term, Miami right now has kind of been like the gateway drug to players who want to play at another spot in the NCHC. Really, they go and play their year at Miami to get their foot in the door and get in the conference and then go to another program. It sucks because it's like, think about Miami when the NCHC was first, indoctrined. They were a fantastic program. They were moments away from winning a national championship. And it's like,
does this not remind you a little bit of when Don Lucia left Colorado College, and then it was sort of the opposite, right? Where, very respected, national championship winning Tigers, right, all of a sudden become where you think Miami is, right? And that's sort of what we've seen from, shall we say, the days of Rico Blasi to now. It's tough. And again, like, for those who are listening, it's not that we take pride in this conversation. It's not like we're trying to beat the dead horse. It's actually more of, you try to figure out what it is, because I think we've said this in the past, that if every team in the NCHC was, I don't want to say competitive, but I don't know how else to frame it, right? Was, just at a different level, the NCHC would be, I think, even more fun to watch because there would be some drama. There would be some, maybe some playoff bursts that are won or lost even in the regular season. And, you'd have some more ups and downs in the postseason. It just stinks that for whatever reason, that program just can't seem to turn a corner. And for whatever reason that is, and you kind of hope actually that they do at some point figure it out sooner than later. But.
Well, we've had that conversation. We finally got to the point last year and maybe the year before where Colorado College finally became that 7th team to kind of get back into that competitive fold. You'd like to see it be 8 and then hopefully 9 next season. So, you hope Miami, if Miami could finish 7th or 6th in the NCHA, I think it would be a great jump. Or if they're finishing 8th, but they're within a stone's throw, I would say within a weekend in terms of in terms of a point spread of 7th or 6th, I would say it would be a successful season. Hopefully they're going to find some success. It's going to take time. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Colorado College and the teams above them, that is who the NCHC had at number 7. We actually had Duluth at number 7 in our spot. Kind of a bit of a controversial call for us. The NCHC
I'm not sure though.
The NCHC has ranked Duluth at 5. Now, to give you an idea of where the point spread is between 5 and 7, according to their poll, that is a full 34-point difference, 123 and one single first place vote. Must have been Max Veach. And then
votes, so there's that.
And then Colorado College at 89. So we have Duluth at 7, Colorado College at 6. So Duluth is 2 back of the poll, according to us. CC is +1 for us in terms of our poll here. I don't think the CC take at number 6 is a big reach, but this 5 to 7 reach, some people might, again, we've talked about this, Duluth at 7. Did we overextend ourselves, or is this Bulldogs team going to struggle this year?
So this is one of the coaches I spent some time with, right, with Scott Sandlin. And, there was, shall I say, a big part of the conversation, again, this is with a lot of media too, is on that self-reflection, right? He talked about how, his feedback process works. And that's not only from his own coaches, his own little self-reflection, but also he gets direct feedback from the players too. I would love to know a couple of those from that locker room that maybe aren't in that same locker room this season, just honestly for curiosity purposes. But, he talked about how he just kind of felt like they just didn't get the bounces.
Yeah.
And also like, just for whatever reason, they just never really got to their game. The good news for Bulldogs fans is Scott Sandlin has never had a back-to-back seasons like this, right? Which makes, if we think about it in retrospect, right? Because we put these together early in the summer, maybe a bit of a reach, but at the same time, you can't discount also above them what CC has done, where they're going. Yep. You can't discount where Western Michigan is or some others above them. So I think, that point spread 34 between 5 and 7, it almost shows that it's actually close and that these guys could finish anywhere in that range. And yeah.
And that's exactly the conversation we had. We talked about how we have Duluth at 7, but that mix of 5 through 7, and I would say even points wise, it looks like the NCHC is leaning more towards 4 through 6 is where they think kind of the bulk of the traffic jam is going to be. But again, I think that's fair. I don't, again, we talked about how inaccurate our polls were last year too, and we were right on with the NCHA. I mean, a lot can happen in this conference, and that speaks to the strength of the conference and how different this can look at the end of the season. You talk about Colorado College, we have them at 6, so we move them up 1 spot from what the NCHA believed in. We've talked about how high we've been for this Tigers program, and again, they were knocking on the doorstep last season. They ultimately didn't maybe get the positioning that we thought they were going to have through the first maybe like 2/3 and change of the year. But boy, I think during playoff time, they outdid themselves.
No, mind you, again, one of my favorite interviews is Chris Mayotte, hands down. Just an absolute beauty of a human being. I asked their captain about him. I said, what's it like playing for Chris Mayotte? And he's like, he just instills belief. He's a guy that, and I even said, I don't play. It's been 20 plus, decades since I played. But I'm like, even when I sit down and talk to him as a media person, he makes me want to run through a freaking wall just with the way he speaks. Right. And when I spoke to Chris Mayotte, he gave me the impression of this. No, I'll give you this analogy. Think of the preseason poll as we're sitting around a poker table, and the rest of the table feels like he's got 9-10. Chris Mayotte is in the table, and he is holding pocket kings. I really do feel like, and I asked him, what's the next step, right? Well, because, again, he talked about it last year when their season ended, that they felt like they were in most of their games, and they felt like they couldn't close out a couple. A big reason for maybe their regular season finish. But towards the end, I think he said their last 8 games, they gave up only 14 goals. Yeah. Huge, right? And then he also said that, coming into this season, what he's most excited about is he's going to have a different looking blue line. He's actually got 3 of the top 15 point producers from the USHL on his blue line. Noah, you and I have watched this team evolve over the past couple of years, and I think we've made the mention that, their forward group, again, we talk about some guys like Hunter McCowan, that they're going to lose that big shot, but, I think they're going to replace it in tandem with some more punch from their blue line, and I think that is going to be that next dynamic for Chris Mayotte. And he just simply said, look, what's next for us is we just got to continue to believe that the work we have is going to pay off. We did that for last year towards the end. We're going to have to do a full season of that. He's like, I have belief in this group. He's like, this group is already coming together super close because everybody got into campus early. There is a real buzz in that locker room. There's a real buzz from the head coach. And again, some of the best looking jerseys in the NCHC. I hate to say it. They're just sick. I love it.
And it took a long time for them to get to that point because they had probably one of the worst looking jerseys for a while there. But you talked about it, getting that secondary scoring, and when it's not coming from the forward side, I think that just balances this group out. We talked about how staunch they were defensively. Really a lot of similarities to the Minnesota Wild in the past couple of years. Plays a great sound defensive game. Now they need that offensive supplementation. They need that breakout group. And if it comes from all facets, so be it. I think if you have a dual threat in the forward and defensive core for CC, I'm excited to watch this Tigers team, plain and simple. I think 89 points, putting them at 7th place in the NCHC for Media Day. Not too thrilled about it. I think they're better than that.
We asked and at the end of, we asked every coach this, right? And their answer is pretty much a little bit of the same, right? And that is, it's preseason polls, right? Yeah. I think some of the players, right? And I think if you were to take them out of that landscape, right, that I think some of them would kind of go, well, screw this, right? Let's prove them wrong. But at the end of it, even Chris Mayotte cautioned that. He's like, listen, everybody's got their opinion, fine, right? Goes, instead of maybe using it as motivation, let's just believe that we're just better and just go out and prove it.
Yeah, that we belong in that spot.
Exactly.
Speaking of belonging in a spot that went the other direction here, number 5, we had North Dakota on that spot. NCHC pundits have them at number 2 at 175, which is, what would that be mathematically? 24 points shy of number 1 Denver, who had 11 first place votes. In fact, North Dakota, I think North Dakota had 12. They actually had more than.
Can I say it this way?
Yeah.
If you're a media member in a monarchy, would you call the king out as BS? No. I mean, I get the sense of that, honestly, Noah. I actually think we have North Dakota exactly where they're going to be.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. So I sat down with Brad Berry, and, as much as people give crap to North Dakota, I actually like Brad as a coach. I think he's actually a pretty straight shooter. I actually think he's, for what he's had to go through the past little bit, I think that he actually coaches a pretty solid game.
Yeah, and I think we would agree with that, by the way, too. I think when it comes to the players in the program, who wouldn't want to play for North Dakota? It's the fans, right?
Yeah, it's some take it more seriously than they should. Anyway, but I asked Brad Berry about the turnover, 14 players, and he just said, look, we had honest conversations. There are some players that just wanted more, and we weren't going to be able to give that to him. So you talk about Nick Port's going to St. Cloud. He goes, he's a great kid. He goes, St. Cloud's going to love this guy, hardworking player. He's going to fill the role that they need. He goes, we hate to see him go, but he was great for us here at North Dakota. We wish him nothing but the best, right? So, but he did not directly, when I asked him about an entire defensive core, coming together, essentially brand new. And essentially he said, it's challenge, yes, but he's like, at the end of it, everybody has to share that responsibility. Now he did sort of mention, because I asked him about Pearson, right? Ludwig Pearson, and I sort of kind of jabbed him a little bit. I says, how were you chomping at the bit when he entered the transfer portal? And he wouldn't admit that he was, on the phone within 30 seconds, but did say that, yeah, I'm sure that many other phones were calling him when his name entered the landscape there. But he did sort of say, not directly, that they're probably going to have to rely on him early, right? That this defensive core is probably going to take time to come together to be able to feel out each other. Again, we've talked about this before, Noah. No matter what level of hockey, right, there's so much that has to go between the trust of a defensive pair and just sort of the instincts to know that where they're going to be, how they like to play the game. It's chemistry that you develop with your defensive partner, and that doesn't happen overnight. So North Dakota's season and why they're at 2, I think you and I would agree that that's based on their offensive firepower that they're returning, and we're not taking anything away from that. But I also think that this team could be similarly hampered just as much as they were last year. And Bradbury admitted that we lost because of our defense.
Yeah,
we did. And he's like, we pride ourselves on a strong defensive game, and we just didn't have that last year. He goes, it lost us games. Either lost because we led and we couldn't hold it, or, we were ahead and we just, we couldn't sustain it at the end of the day.
And so there's something to be said too for, players don't just leave North Dakota. Put that out there where it's like, right. It's a primo program in college hockey to play for. And I think it's like, if you're having that honest conversation, you got to credit Brad a little bit for not being afraid to shuffle the deck a little bit. It's hard sometimes at a program like that to feel like you can hit the reset button on the fly a little bit. And
correct. And you actually perfectly segued into a question that a lot of people are asking these coaches, and Bradbury included, is, the effect of the transfer portal, right? And, granted, we're towards the end of the COVID extra year, right, which has thrown, in the coach's perspective, a little bit of a wrench. I think all of them sort of agree that they think it'll calm down a little bit, but I think the general expectation is this is sort of the new norm. And, that's interesting, right? And so it says volumes that, players, because I think it's twofold, right? I think coaches are, it's sort of, in a weird way, we talked about Leo Gruba last week and, some of the challenges with those conversations before we even get to a program. But I think the expectation now from college coaches is nothing's guaranteed for every year, right? And more so, I think on the players end, I think seeing the transfer portal and, there's probably stories like Grant Cruikshank, for example, the guy the Huskies really benefited from. When I talked to Brad Larson, they were like, we would have been happy with 10 goals. He got almost 20, or if he did hit 20, he's like, so at the end of it, players are taking advantage of it and they're, bettering themselves and better opportunities because of that. So because there's more of those stories than latter, that's why most of the college hockey landscape is expecting sort of these numbers to continue even after the COVID eligibility. So I think coaches now are just kind of preparing for every off season to sort of be this guessing game and kind of forcing everybody to check in with each other. Just, hey, where you're at. And if a player isn't not getting the ice time or the opportunity he wants, he can hit the transfer portal and coaches will have to adjust in the program. So and like you said, when you leave North Dakota, it shows you that I think the landscape's changing with the player's perspective, where it's not just about, Herb Brooks quote, right? Not just the program on the front, but the name in the back. I think they're also understanding that, hey, college hockey is competitive. I also have dreams either to make a pro career, and, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I don't have to play for North Dakota. I can go to a lot of other schools that have a pedigree of developing NHL talent, which to a degree, Noah, and I want to get your thoughts on this, shows that the college hockey game is gaining notoriety. It's also showing that they're adjusting and getting to that higher level that I think kids are being attracted to come develop their game, knowing they have a chance to make it into the pros.
Well, we've talked about, I think the only negative side of this is you worry about programs that are smaller programs and programs that have a tough time recruiting normally. Again, your CCs, your Miamis, your Omahas, that's where the challenge lies. But the NCHC itself has bolstered itself into a formation where they have strong teams, 7-8 teams at a time that have looked really good. Arizona State, for example, going to be a fantastic addition. So it'll be very good. I will say, at least for our purposes here too, even if we have discrepancies here, 3 out of the 4 bottom teams and 3 out of the 4 top teams we had in the top or bottom 4 respectively in this poll. So I think that, we're still kind of the mind too, of where you can tell the programs that are still maybe going to have sustained success this season. North Dakota at 2, in our eyes, a bit of a reach. I think that's kind of fair to say. Number 4, Western Michigan, exactly where we had them. Not a whole lot to say, I think, for Pat Ferschweiler's squad here. Blue collar group definitely is someone that could finish anywhere from 3 to 5, I think, in this conference. I think 4 is the exact spot that is appropriate for them.
They get a bump late, no pun intended. What a get though, honestly, for Pat Ferschweiler. Because I would imagine, well, actually, probably not, because you think of the timing too of the Vermont situation. For those we've talked about that in episodes past, just not a good situation for a lot of people involved in the Vermont community. In fact, I think just recently this week, if I remember correctly, Noah, or was it late last week, that they finalized the coaching changes essentially as part of that fallout. So you're hoping that the program can be stable, right? Because I know that Alex Bump was one of their primo commits. They still have Max Strand. That's a primo commit, again, another Minnesota kid up from Roselle, that, as far as we know, still got the catamount attached to his name. But at the end of the day, it's tough, right? And I think for Western Michigan, 4 is right where they're at. Again, you can't. It's hard to replace a Jason Poland. 30 plus goals. I mean, it's a hell of a senior campaign, and mind you, just a wicked release, wicked shot. He's definitely got an NHL shot to his game. But so we'll have to do it by committee. But again, depth in their lineup, guys who will come in and definitely contribute. They probably won't be able to rely on, the one guy like a Poland. They'll have to do it more by committee, but still enough talent there where they deserve to be in the top 4.
Yeah, certainly would agree. Really, as we kind of go through the list here, it sorts itself out for the most part, I guess, in the top 2. We, of course, had Denver at number 1, as did the NCHC. This Pioneers team, we previewed them last week. They're going to be a good team. I mean, they're
a wagon.
Yeah, they're going to be good. Number 2, we talked about North Dakota being there. We have St. Cloud State in that spot. They move up from number 3 in the NCHC poll to number 2 in ours, so a +1 bump. We'll talk about the Huskies next week for the men's program in depth. So our final spot here at number 3, moving +3 in our eyes compared to the NCHC poll here, Nick. And maybe this was our reach on the other side of Duluth potentially. Omaha slotting in at number 6 with 113 points in the NCHC polls. We have them at number 3, which would move them where St. Cloud is currently listed at 155. So a pretty stark contrast of what would that be? Mathematics 42 points. Is that right? Somewhere around there. This Omaha group, again, we talked about they could finish anywhere from 3 to 5. Again, we talked about maybe even 3 to 6 being a potential challenge too. We've been high on this Mavs team. And again, we talked about it where, if you're Mike Gabinet and you look at this and you say, maybe we don't have the firepower that a lot of other teams have. Maybe we don't have these high-end recruits. Is this a reach for us in our final spot to put them at number 3, or do they have enough blue-collar grit to be a formidable force in the NCHC?
I think they do so. And then for the record, it's Gabinet, like Cabinet. Yeah. I always goof it up here and there too. So, but I talked to Noah Sullivan, again, Eden Prairie kid, who is their captain and, sort of the, shall we say, the aura around Nebraska Omaha hockey. And it's kind of funny because this was after, for those who don't remember, Media Day was just after the big volleyball game that was held at the football stadium, because that's something where they can sell it out. Their football team won't. But at the end of the day, they truly believe that they have 4 lines deep. They really do. And I actually tend to agree with them. I really do. Gabinet echoed the same thing. He goes, it's we don't have the star power. We've got some good kids. They're like, might surprise some people, but he goes, for the most part, we're going to be a hardworking blue collar type team that's going to come at you in waves. And I will tell you, Noah Sullivan's an absolute joy to talk to. Because they talk about the recruiting process. Again, other media surrounding these conversations, and the common theme we hear from Noah Sullivan was, when you put Nebraska Omaha's name and that's all people know about college hockey, there's kind of this befuddled question mark, right? That's like, what? And then you get down to the facilities and it's just like, holy cow. Right. And we sort of kind of went back to that and said, there was a reason the NCHC chose you to host the pod, not North Dakota, which I'm sure they're still triggered about that, but that's fine. But they said, it goes, if we can get him on campus, it's like it sells itself. Baxter Arena is absolutely gorgeous. It's a primo hockey facility. And he goes, it's not even beyond that. The apartments, the dorms, he goes, the academics, he goes, the whole experience is fantastic. And he's like, it's certainly still tough. He goes, there's still some, he thinks, geography that's attached to it, but he goes, he really feels confident, the captain and with Gabinet and our conversations, that they feel like, they're going to bump and bruise you. And they also going to have some scoring touch that might surprise some people. And I tend to agree with them.
Yeah, definitely. And really what it came down to for our polls compared to the NCHC polls, it was really Omaha versus North Dakota flip-flopping in relative sense there. And then it's really Duluth versus Colorado College, and then throw that Omaha UND 6 spot in there. That's kind of where we were at for the discrepancies. Nick, before we move on to the women's team for St. Cloud and briefly touch on the WCHA poll, which there won't be much to touch on because we were pretty much right on the money with them, at least for the start of the season. Any particular highlight that you wanted to pull from NCHC Media Day?
I do, actually. And this is something where I think college hockey fans want to hear, right? This was very much shared because, Scott Stanley is part of the college hockey, essentially committee board. So it's not the rules committee, but essentially more of an advisory board, just ideas here and there. And let's just say this sentiment was shared by every single coach in the room, that they didn't say it this way. So I'll kind of reframe it for them. Essentially, from the Sandlin's mouth, we need to do more about the small programs. So if I frame that, the question is, there seems to be a concern about those small schools, right? So I'm guessing the independents, right? So we're talking the Alaska schools. We're probably talking the small schools. Let's throw Miami in there, right?
I won't even say St. Cloud is a far cry away from that conversation.
Honestly, at this point. And they talked about, how we need to do more as a college hockey universe to prop up and ensure that these small schools survive, right? So in other words, how I gather it, again, you can talk about NIL deals, or you can talk about funding gaps here and there. And, at the end of it, I think there is a true conversation happening behind closed doors. If I'm following the tea leaves correctly, which sometimes I'm not, that I think there is a growing concern with not only the cost of the game, but also, to some of these other programs that aren't getting, the same funding with other conferences. And, they're having to rely on maybe other sports within the school, or maybe some grant money, sponsorship. St. Cloud right now, I'll tell you, is highly reliant on their donors, right? And I hate to say it's a small list. It should be a lot bigger. That the sustainability of some of these schools is in question. That's what I inferred. And it sounds like there really is a push behind closed doors with these head coaches to bring, I think, not only awareness, I think there is that already, but to try to find an actual applicable solution to make sure that they are sustainable, and how to maybe disperse the wealth per se to make sure that college hockey continues to not only expand, but more so do it in a way that's concrete and with a solid foundation.
Yeah, certainly sustainability is key, even for teams across the board. For example, St. Cloud State coming into the season number 8 in the national polls for the men's program. So again, gives you an idea that it doesn't just mean that the top teams and the big dogs are going to be safe. If you're up in that top 16 and getting an NCAA bid, there's a lot of conversation to be had there. It's going to be an exciting season. We can't wait to talk about the men's team next week and cap off our previews for the NCHC and get hockey season officially underway. On the women's side, you look at the polls that came out for the WCHA, and we were fairly on the money. We had a couple of cop-outs, quote unquote, so to speak. We had Ohio State followed by Wisconsin. Wisconsin and Ohio State actually tied in the WCHA poll for first place votes for each of them, 46 points apiece in the preseason poll. So, but we did have them at 1 and 2. Ohio State we had at 1, and then Minnesota at number 3. The WCHA agreed with that, 35 points, a full 11 points shy for the Gophers in number 3. Duluth rounds out the home spots, just 2 points shy of the Gophers at 33 points. We had them at number for as well. And I like that pick. It shows how competitive Duluth could be this season. St. Cloud, which we'll talk about today, is at 27, only 5 back of Duluth. Again, a conversation we've had where the top 5 could be very good. St. Cloud State coming in at number 13 in the national polls to start the year. And then number 6, we had Mankato. Number 7, we had St. Thomas, both of them sharing the 6th place spot, according to the WCHA polls, at 17 points. And we both had Bemidji State rounding out the poll at number 8, 7 points total for the Beavers, who are in for some probably big turnover this season from what we talked about. They were our first preview of the season this past summer. So, Nick, I guess just briefly before we talk about the St. Cloud women's team, we agree, similar like we did with the NCHC last year. Doesn't mean we're going to be right. Do you feel like this one might be closer to being on the money, all things considered?
Probably. I think, again, in short, we talk about how the WCHA is really in 2 tiers, and it's split pretty much in half, right? You have Minnesota, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and probably now, if we're being honest, Duluth up in that upper echelon. And then you have the other 4, including St. Cloud in that bottom tier. The hope is, that St. Cloud is going to knock on the door of that top 4 again. So you maybe take that, shall we say, dotted line and maybe extend it down to 5, right? It's going to be a tough, shall we say, door to crack, but we do feel like, that's kind of where things stand with the WCHA.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be exciting. And if you can get at least 5 teams in the fold and Mankato continues to push, I think it's going to be a really fun year for college hockey on the women's side. The WCHA, arguably the best conference in women's college hockey, hopefully looking to maintain
not even arguably.
That. Yeah. Hopefully, I was trying to be nice about it.
Since when have you ever done that?
I try occasionally.
Occasionally, well, it's not when we're playing MLB The Show. I'll tell you that much.
Hey,
like Miami versus Denver, not good.
I'll set Miami or maybe Denver versus Minot State this season. We'll see.
Yeah, that too.
On the women's side, though, same building as the men, of course. Herbrooks National Hockey Center, 5,159 is capacity for that building. Right now, St. Cloud State a full 18 points shy of Duluth last season. They finished 5th behind the 4th place Duluth Bulldogs. Nick, take us through last season and some of the records that were actually fairly good as far as conference play was concerned.
So I know some folks said that 18 was their record. I believe if I checked their history right back in the mid 2000s,
I want to say 19 or 20
was the program record. So, and mind you, talked to Idalski a couple of weeks ago before their series opener, and I asked him about 20, and he said, "Yeah, be nice."
As he sipped his coffee.
Yeah, his Costa Rican dark roast apparently, and he gets his beans from North Dakota somewhere. So, but no, again, to me, it's not about the stats, right? I guess maybe I'm the old school hockey eye test guy. Again, playing the game and broadcasting it, you could tell, because I remember I was up there for one of the first against RPI, one of the first weekends, and the difference in their play was instantaneous. You could just tell, especially in the defensive zone, a lot better structure, and more so when they got the puck, right? Everybody that was on the ice knew where they had to go without it to offer up a lane, or, as far as a passing lane, or if there was an opportunity to skate the puck, it was get the puck out and go, right? Go north. This year, even more so on the offensive side. So at the end of it last year, started that foundation. They got, good wins again against Minnesota, which hadn't happened in a long time. They'll take Ohio State to a shootout. Wisconsin, right? So at the end of it, these are teams that, let's be honest, right? For lack of a better term, when they either were on the schedule, it was, okay, how bad is it going to be, right? And if we can keep them close, it was less of, St. Cloud feeling like they had a good game, and more so it was kind of a combination of a really good game and maybe not the best outing for the other opponent. That's not going to be the same this year. And last year too, right? They really kept games close in a few. Again, just maybe lacking some punch back, but they put their foots down. They battled hard, and that was the big thing that I think we noticed. And it led to some really exciting moments. And they're going to be definitely hungry for more this year. That's for sure.
What stands out to me, Nick? There wasn't a single team in the WCHA last season that the Huskies did not take at least a point from. And, I think that, for example, the team that had their number the most last season was Duluth. Only one shootout loss. The Huskies could only push past regulation, but all the games were close. 1-0 victory against Wisconsin. We talked about the overtime loss to Ohio State, and then a victory in that non-conference game against Minnesota, which unfortunately Minnesota was the only team that, according to the WCHA, they didn't garner points from because it was a non-conference game. But nonetheless, great success for this program, right? You talked about it, 18 wins, 18 losses. 18-18-1 was the official record, so exactly 500, 11-16-1 in conference play. You talked about those 1-goal contests, 4-5. I mean, they're right under 500 in those games. Very good record when scoring first. When they outshot their opponent, they were undefeated. So you talked about how shot volume was obviously very pivotal. Exactly 500 at home, 8-8. You like to see that. 7-10-1 on the road, 3-0 in neutral sites. So you talk about if they would have made an NCAA tournament, it could have been interesting. 7-0 in non-conference play. Nick, I believe the best record in the WCHA in non-conference action, actually besting Ohio State. So, and of course, 0-2 in the playoffs. They lost 1-0 and 5-1 in the WCHA opener to Duluth.
Backbreaker.
It was
emotionally. And even Idalski said after that weekend series again against Union that effectively they were just already kind of out of gas towards the end of the season. And when you take a close team like that you had a chance with, and you just get squeaked out, I think not physically, but certainly emotionally, I think that was very deflating.
Yeah, certainly would agree. And obviously a team at 20% on the power play, nothing to scoff at. 86% on the PK. I mean, some pretty good numbers. Scoring wise, actually, the Huskies were outscored by 9 on the season, 96-87, a much closer margin than previous years. Their best period was
lighter usually.
Yes, their best period was period number 2, where they put up 41 goals, 438 against. They were -1 goal diff in period number 1. It was the third period where teams started to pull away if it wasn't a close contest. Outshot still pretty heavily, around like 250 to 300. But other than that, some really great numbers for this program. And a lot of great things to take away. None of which, would be remiss to mention the reigning USCHO National Coach of the Year, WCHA Coach of the Year, a .595 winning percentage for Brian Idalski in his second season, 16 total seasons as a head coach, .295, 193, and 51 overall entering the year this year. Nick, I mean, what more can we say about Brian Idalski? And hint for those who are listening, it's a long list that we have on our note sheet. So
very long list, right? So the accolades, it's nice, that he's getting recognized, but again, right, just it's more than just now, right? He's gotten the job done no matter where he's gone. And I think just because of just the stark turnaround, it's what's kind of gotten him, sort of say more recognized because of that, right? So how about this? 3 Conference Coach of the Year honors while coaching his teams to 5 NCAA tournament appearances, an NCAA tournament final berth, 4 conference tournament championships, 7 conference tournament finals, and 3 regular season conference championships. I'm just getting started. So he's coached 10 Olympians, 35 national team members from 9 different countries, 9 All-Americans, a Patty Kazmaier finalist, 4 Patty Kazmaier top 10 finalists, 2 NCAA Grade A award winners, 5 WCHA Outstanding Student Athletes of the Year, 1 Conference Player of the Year, 1 Conference Rookie of the Year, and 42 All-Conference selections. I'm catching my breath. Okay. How about this? For those who just like the numbers, right? Across 16 seasons as a head coach in essentially what all he's done, right? Career record of in conference 193, 149, and 39. That's a career 55.9% winning percentage. He has earned 3 NCHA regular season championships with UW Stevens Point and has orchestrated top half conference finishes in 7 of his 11 seasons in the WCHA. Again, most of this coming with North Dakota before that was axed lightly.
Which is insane to me still.
I know.
I think about that. But what he did with North Dakota was a little bit more drawn out, but almost the same process. You think about when North Dakota first came in the fold, their first maybe, 2 seasons, they kind of struggled a little bit. And then it's like...
Isn't it the 3-win season before he came aboard? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the wagon started rolling until someone stole the wheels right out from under it. But... I mean, you talk about that program, and really it's like if you had to name a program at that time in what was it, 2015, 16, somewhere around there, if you had to name a program in the WCHA that was not going to be in the WCHA next season, I don't even know that they maybe would have cracked the top 3 on that list.
I don't even think it would have made a list, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. Right. It was stunning when it happened, and it still is stunning from multiple angles, but
yeah,
that's a rabbit hole that we do not have time to go
welcome
down.
welcome to America's wasteland. I live in it.
Yeah.
But when you talk about Brian Idolski as a head coach, though, the ideology was immediate. The change was immediate. And, we're going to talk about this in a second. This specific approach to the game had been brewing for a while, and taking nothing away from Steve McDonald, who I just saw was fishing last weekend, and wishing him the best luck. He's clearly enjoying life, so good for him.
Yeah.
His style of play was much different. And when you and I got a chance to talk with these coaches, Janelle Sergey among them, you could tell that Janelle Sergey wanted a little bit more offensive push, a little bit more in that department. I think this is her 5th season as associate head coach, 10th total with the program. You finally got to see kind of, the shackles get undone a little bit.
Yep.
Her style meshed very well with Brian Idolski's ideology.
Yep.
And you're starting to see that firepower that is coming into the fold. And I am like beyond stoked for this women's team this season. This is a team. This is a team that could make an NCAA tournament if all things
100%
go the way that we hopefully expect them to. Nick, before we talk about Janelle, when you've had conversations with Brian, if you can get him to stop sipping his coffee, where are we at with this? Because again, we've raved about him for a year and change now.
Yep.
And we've tried to pull multifaceted approaches to talking about this women's program under his tenure. But if you had to really pull out one piece of information, if it was a contest of like, you can only say one thing about Brian Idolski that encapsulates what he means to this program, and I'm trying to buy Nick some time, where would you ultimately go?
Accountability. That's it. Honestly. I've had conversations with Brian that essentially claims that that's the way he operates. He has expectations, and meet it or you don't play, or meet it and I have no problem moving up and down the line. Right. Let's say it this way. And maybe this is unfair, but I think Noah, when we talk about Steve in the past, right. And again, I'm with you, great human being. And I get the sense, and I'm not trying to speak for anybody in that program, nor are we trying to, bash words. Right. But I think with Steve, there was a sense of, this is the status quo. This is what we have to work with. So we're going to sort of play to what we have. Right. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But it also meant that if you're trying to move a program up, that was probably not the ideology you wanted moving forward. Right. Not to say that there weren't other challenges, right, beyond Steve's control, but that's the sense that I got. Brian was like, nope. When he first came in, he told the girls, okay, we want to do this. We want to have, a 500 season. We want to have close to 20 wins. He just basically, in essentially a hypothetical sense, just held a mirror up.
Yeah.
Essentially. Right. And we saw that last year. In fact, in our talks before, he said, I basically, played 2 lines for a lot of the year just to try to keep us in the game. And he goes, but, toward the end of the year, it hurt us because we were just burned out, with the heavy minute eaters that he had. So, and then again, you see that reflection in, some of the transfers, and we'll get into some of those, ins and outs here in a little bit, but effectively, yes, accountability, but he's also a fantastic teacher.
Well, you look at,
right.
Well, you look at all the teams that have success. I think for a great example is Janelle Sergey, who of course comes from Wisconsin. You look at Mark Johnson, who we raved about a couple of weeks ago. That's what those programs do. It is not, oh, well, we've done this, so that's okay. It's we've done this. How can we get better every day? And that accountability piece, I think, is vitally important. You talked about, his approach to the game. Janelle Sergey the same way. 2010 Olympic silver medalist, 8 Huskies to all WCHA honors, 5 all rookie team selections, 15 Huskies with 20-point seasons since she's been there, 14 double-digit goal campaigns during that time as well too. And as Nick would say, I'm just getting started. 17 Huskies with pro contracts during her tenure. Kayla Friesen and Hannah Bates, former podcast guest, by the way, both of the Connecticut Whale were NWHL and PHF draftees, basically. As a player herself, like we said, 2010 Winter Olympics, silver medalist, also won silver with Team USA in 2007, Four Nations tournament participants in 2006, 7, 9, and 10. And for the Badgers, 4-year career, 89 goals, 67 assists, 156 points, 3 20-goal seasons, 40 points twice, and 50 points in her junior season. So, if you're looking for someone who knows how to run a power play and score some goals, just, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And Nick, that doesn't even round out the coaching crew. Actually, for the first time in quite a while, this Huskies program, of course, Billy Hangen pulling double duty, but this program has four coaches in the fold.
It does. Again, Mira Uluso. Is it? No, it's not Uluso. It's I know I botched that name, but she goes off, actually now a head coach in the PWHL. So for those thinking about the respect Adolski has, one of his assistants now is a pro head hockey coach. So they take that into consideration. But Billy Hengen, again, a big coach at Gentry Academy. So you talk about what kind of a recruiting advantage that could have. Gentry Academy is kind of a wagon in terms of girls high school hockey. So he's got quite the accolades. In fact, how about this? 2022-2023 last year, won the Class AA title, which for those outside of Minnesota who don't know, that's the top class of high school hockey. And they went 27-2 along the way. That's pretty good, right? So that's just their third year of program history. They already have a state title. So take that with some consideration, right? Also led the boys program in 2020 to 21 to a Class Single A state championship, and they were undefeated 19-0. So crap, right? So winning, right? And success, right? More than anything, right? I know about this. He played at St. Cloud, right? Graduated in 2006. So he went under coaches Craig Dull and Bob Moscow, again, both former guests of the show as well. So at the end of it, as a player and as a coach, has been success there. Also, all academic honors for the WCHA in 2005 and 6. So there's that. And then Militia. Yes, Militia.
Well, don't forget, by the way, Nick, back-to-back 20-point seasons as a sophomore and junior, 32 his senior year. Actually led the Huskies in assist points per game over his final 3 years during that time. Oh, and coaching tenure, by the way, previously before some state championships, his 16 and 15 U teams had 50 and 60 wins, respectively, for Gentry. So, oops.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot some of those stats. I'll make sure it's line by line. So, Militia McMillan in her first season, I'll put that in parentheses. There you go. I'm now going to get kind of funky with this. So, bullet points: an All-American and 4-time All-WCHA selection at Minnesota with professional playing experience in the NWHL. Next bullet point: 3 years of coaching experience in the WCHA. That's in parentheses at Ohio State. Coached 5 All-Americans, 1 WCHA Defensive Player of the Year, 1 WCHA Rookie of the Year, 6 All-WCHA honorees, and 2 WCHA All-Rookie team members over her 3 years with the program. 3 20-win seasons. And last but not least, because I'm not going to forget this, McMillan will work with the Huskies defensive corps, which again was vacated by Mira from last year. So did I miss anything?
Bitter much? I love it.
A little bit.
But really, I mean, there's a massive, extensive accolade resume for this coaching staff. And I think we've taken so much time to talk about the Ohio States, the Minnesotas, the Duluths, and talk about their coaching groups. And, St. Cloud is getting to that point where it's like, I mean, you go back really literally, Nick, 4 or 5 years ago, the cupboards were a little bit bare as far as some of the pedigree for some of these coaches. And it's like, now you've started to see the success that Janelle Sergey has finally found. Now you bring Brian Idolski into the fold. You've kind of had, Mira Uluso, like you mentioned, who ended up signing her contract, and you add, Milica McMillan in her first season. Militia, sorry. And so, you have a group that continues to get better and better, even on the coaching front too. And that's where, to me, this Huskies program has taken another step too, is you can talk all that you want about these players. You can talk all that you want about what they need to do better, the groups that you're bringing in, which we're going to talk about in a second, but having a good coaching group that meshes well, that kind of preaches the same thing and lets the players play to their potential and then some, I think is extremely important. Nick, we talk about players from last season. They lose a couple of graduates, a lot of fifth-year players. Unina Newland, Tatum Geyer, McKenna Westlow, Allie Cornelius was a redshirt senior last year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they lose. And they also lose 8 total transfers this upcoming season, Nick. So, which was kind of a big list, to start, but with the portal on the other side and the incoming freshmen, obviously, it seems to have alleviated that very quickly. 5 forwards, 2 defensemen, 1 goaltender, Nick, that are on their way out. Who are the Huskies losing for the upcoming season?
Courtney Hall, who had 15 points in 35 games. Olivia Savar, who, funny enough, the next time the Huskies play, we'll be facing off with each other because she went to Mercyhurst. She had 10 points in 35 games. Allison Green, also gone 3 points in 33 games. Chase Sperling only dressed for 1 game, had 0 points. I think that speaks for itself. Lauren Tuzik, 30 games, 0 points as a defenseman. Julia Bacchetti, who did not dress a single game as a freshman goaltender, she goes to find other opportunities. I can't really say I blame her very much, right? You have a 1A and a 1A in Jojo Chobak and Sonia Hola, so that's not too surprising. Mackenzie Bourgeray, 37 games played, 1 assist, and then Bailey Burton, who only played about half the year. In fact, was actually out for the basically the last half of the season with was away from the team. She had 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points, so she essentially aged out. So those are the folks that no longer in the Huskies system.
Yeah, Allison Green and Bailey Burton yet to have a destination as far as I can see, according to the Rink Live. You're exactly correct. Olivia Savar at Mercyhurst, Chase Sperling and Courtney Hall going to Robert Morris, respectively. Mackenzie Bourgeray, we've talked about this, ended up at Mankato. And then Julia Bacchetti ended up at Maine. And then the one that was kind of unique to me, Lauren Tuzik, who played in 30 games in the back end as a freshman, didn't have a point, but headed to D3 Norwich. So that was kind of an interesting little...
probably one of those honest conversations of, okay,
that's a lot of games though. I mean,
it is. But and again, I'm not trying to speak for Idalski, but I definitely get the sense that after last year, as you see with some of the turnover, right, I think there were some honest conversations from both coach and players themselves, right, about, what an offseason might look like. And maybe isn't as surprising as we want to think. And I'll tell you what, from what we saw a couple of weeks ago, so far for St. Cloud as a whole, it's been all right.
Yeah, certainly has 6 transfers coming in, 4 forwards, 2 defensemen, Nick, who's entering the fold on the other side.
So a couple from Bemidji State, actually. Ella Onik, who, holy cow, had 7 points all last year, already has 5 in 2 games. How about that, right? She had 2 goals, 5 assists. Taylor Larson coming over, she had 0 points. When I saw her play again against Union, a very good all-around player. Probably not the biggest offensive threat, but very smart, very good on her feet, makes good decisions. Cece Bowlby, who is kind of a dark horse from Dartmouth, 19 points, including 10 goals. Avery Farrell, who I'll tell you a good quote from Avery Farrell after the game against Union on Sunday. Dalski called her the biggest surprise. And you wouldn't think so, right? Because when you look at her numbers, 12 goals, 16 assists, 28 points for Franklin Pierce. But again, the conversation we've had this, over, shall we say, to the men's side out east and some conferences that are, shall we say, not up to the standards of, say, the Big Ten or the NCHC. So she was kind of a question mark, but the raw skill was there, and she's worked her way in the lineup. Now, granted, there's been some injuries and some illnesses that have led to an opportunity, but she scored. She got an assist. She's producing. And she said the conversation with Idalski was, I'm not sure I'm going to have like a permanent spot for you. But if you're up for the challenge of competing for one, I can give that to you. And she basically said, yes, I want a challenge. She's like, I feel like at Franklin Pierce that, it was not necessarily handed to me, but it wasn't challenging enough. And, all smiles on her face after Sunday's game. She really felt like she contributed. I thought she looked great and feels like, yes, I got an opportunity, and maybe it's going to be one of those situations with Idalski in this roster. You're going to have decisions to make as head coach Idalski on the forward side. He said he's got 5 good solid lines. Again, they didn't dress Svenja Vogt, who is a German national team member. She was out with illness. And then Regan Bulger also on the back end was out because of an illness, or actually, sorry, it was lower body injury. So they've got kids who they can slot in, and they're having to scratch, not because of raw skill, but because of essentially execution at this point. That's how good this Huskies team is.
Yeah, certainly is. Like you mentioned, Katie Kaufman and Maddie Peterson, from Merrimack and RPI, rounding out that list, 23 and 6 points respectively. Really curious to see how Taylor Larson assimilates too, coming from over from a Bemidji State and seeing that movement. Nick, and you've got 3 defensemen in addition on the freshman side: Jaden Britt, Sydney Bryant, and Kenzie Hope on the back end. That enter the fold, not to mention 5 forwards and a goaltender for this freshman crew of a pretty big class, all things considered.
9 freshmen.
Yeah, why don't we start maybe with the defenseman?
Sure. So for Jaden Britt, right? She played on that Sunday game, more of a stay-at-home defenseman, but also, again, good feet, good decision maker. Sydney Bryan and Kenzie Hope. They had good junior careers in terms of, the women's hockey side of things. There's definitely an upside there. On the forward side, Grace Delmonico, again, one of the Gentry Academy recruits. There's no connection again. They're from Billy Hengen, I would imagine. I'm totally kidding. Some would say undersized. She's 5'3", but she had a lickety split stat line at Gentry Academy. So there's raw talent there. It's more of, she's probably going to need a little bit more time to develop and assimilate to the Division I level. Greta Henderson, Marie Moran, again, same kind of a deal there. Good junior careers, just probably need some more time to assimilate. Alice Surreal, coming over for Quebec. I had a really good junior career over there in essentially the ladies version of the QMJHL. And Sofia Sunderland, the Finnish Olympic player. Holy cow, is she good.
Yeah. I believe rookie of the week in the WCHA last week. Yeah.
A lot of chances on that, and that top line, the Olympic line of Sunderland. It was Klara Himlerova, and I'm missing one more, and it's going to drive me absolutely up the wall. Laura Zimmerman, the Swiss. That's a nasty first line, and there was definitely some chemistry there. And Sofiana, again, even as a freshman, showed that with her skill and her decision making, she belongs on that. She is definitely the name to watch on the forward side. And then Paige,
Well, I mean, if you're talking forward side, just to kind of throw this because, numbers, right? I mean, 110 career games, 117 points, 57 of those goals for Sofiana. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Nuts.
All these forwards, Alice, like you talked about, 62-point senior campaign for her. Did we talk about Marie Moran too? I don't even know if we mentioned her. 166 points over 5 years in her varsity career. You talk about Greta Henderson, only 7 Regina athletes to reach 100 career points. She was one of them. And then Grace, like you talked about, 68 points in 28 contests for Gentry. So, I mean, we talked about St. Cloud needing to get to that point where they supplemented that first wave that really was Klara Himlerova's group with more offense to find that success from our freshman class. I'd say the Huskies did all right.
Yeah, they did fine. And again, and granted, 2 games in, is certainly too early for a litmus test. But from what we've seen so far in terms of how the team itself and the chemistry there looks good. I'll say that much. Looks very good.
Yeah, definitely would agree. And Nick, like you mentioned, you're about to mention our single goaltender who has a great hockey name. Has to be.
Paige is a Hogendam. Pretty sure I think it's Hogendam.
I don't know. Yeah.
I hate to say this out loud, but I kind of feel bad, right? Because it's going to be tougher to get playing time behind Showback and Sonia Hola. So the good news is, she'll develop, and I'm sure that she'll be able to push. It'll be interesting to see, because I believe it's Sonia. Yeah, is it Sonia that's the senior this year? Or is it JoJo? One of the two is a senior.
I think it's JoJo.
I think it's JoJo.
Let me look.
So it's going to be a question of, what does JoJo Chobak want to do, right? Did she come back for a graduate year? And that's certainly going to be a name to watch more for future watch. As long as those two are healthy, I would imagine Adolski will rotate them.
They're both seniors.
They're both seniors. Okay.
Yeah.
So the door could be open for her next year. I would think, and you don't want this, right? But, barring an injury to one of the other ladies or an illness, that, she probably will be sitting light on the minutes, which is okay because she'll learn a lot from these two. These are two very, very good goaltenders, and Adolski has credited a lot of the success last season to be having essentially two starters that he can rotate in and out and keep them fresh. So, again, raw numbers are there. We saw her junior career for Paige, but at the end of the day, probably not going to be a name that we call a ton. And that's more just a compliment to the two goaltenders that have been here and continue to play at a high level.
Yeah, when you're coming from Pickering High School in Toronto with the Junior Arrows, if you have a 9.58 save percentage and a 1.98 GAA facing almost 50 shots a game and you're the third string netminder,
that's disgusting. Honestly.
Not too shabby. Obviously, like we talked about.
You must be watching the Maple Leafs, but actually stopping pucks.
And when I think about this program too, I mean, you talked about players that are returning. We talked about Klara Himlerova, who paced the team last season as far as returners, 26 points for her last year, 17 goals, the best on the team. Emma Gentry will come in for her senior season, had 22 points last season. Taylor Lind, a graduate player that is staying, she had over 20 points last year. Grace Wolf on the back end was almost at 20 points last season. This Huskies team has a chance to, if everything goes right, the freshmen come up to speed, the transfers feel good, they could challenge for a top 4 spot in the WCHA. I don't know if they could get to 3, just depending on the firepower that the top 3 or 4 do have. But to say that they wouldn't be in the conversation to challenge like a Duluth at 4 is definitely not out of the question, Nick.
No, it's not.
Why don't we pull up the schedule here and take a look at the Huskies and who they have coming up? What's up?
Hold the phone. Because we're not following the bullet points. I'm gonna call you on this BS because this is what we do. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
Captains. So, and the reason actually I'm stopping.
Well, we talked about it 3 weeks ago, so that's why I brushed over it. So, but
okay. But I actually have the answer on why there's 6.
Okay.
From my friend. So this is actually kind of a cool story. So when I talked to Brian again before the Union Series, I asked him about 6 captains. I'm like, that's a lot. And essentially he said, the leadership group that was already there, in the locker room, the veteran folks. He's like, we took a vote and it was basically kind of split. And, he was like, I don't want to take away or devalue, that leadership in the room. So what they're doing is there's going to be essentially rotating alternate captains home and away. There's going to be 2 that wear the A at home, a different 2 that wear those away. So there'll be 4 captains always dressed. Essentially, it's going to be Himlerova, Lind, and one other?
Here,
just Himlerova and Lind that are the all-time captains, essentially the C and the A. And then there's going to be 2 rotating 2 rotate at home and 2 rotated away.
Yeah. So I've got as far as assistant captains, like you mentioned, like you said, Taylor Lind will wear the C, Klara Himlerova, then Emma Gentry, Dale Ross, Addie Scribner, Grace Wolf round out that group. So,
and here's what was cool. So when I asked him, hey, at the end of it, on the men's side, we talked about how, the room has to sort of lead itself to be successful at the highest level. He's like, was that part of this? And, or is this sort of like you're trying to hand the keys to the car per se? And he's like, every team that's successful, and he's like, I've been a part of him as a coach, I've been part of him as a player. That's how it works. Because the team, if they're leading themselves and they're the ones that are, calling the shots and effectively, yes, I have them wanting to play a certain way. And if that's being resonated and, it's not something I have to sort of monitor myself. He goes, that's makes a successful national championship winning type program. He's like, we sort of have that. He goes, and there were others that received votes that were younger kids that we didn't want to give them a letter just because we felt like maybe they were just too young. He's like, so yeah, there's 6 captains, but he's like, honestly, there could have been more.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool to hear because that's, again, not trying to take down other, Husky rosters in the past, but that's just not a locker room that we heard of before Idalski, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, certainly would agree. And, when you have a locker room that has so many players that lead themselves and have potential in that regard, again, like you said, it just bodes well. And it's like nobody looks at the person to their left or the person to their right, and there's no sort of like, disrespect, so to speak. It's like everybody is, an equal contributor to the process. And yeah, this women's team, I can't wait for them to continue their schedule. We talked about 10-1 was the final score over the weekend, 2 games against Union a couple of weeks ago. They get back in action this week. Mercyhurst, the 6th and 7th games are at 5 o'clock and 1 o'clock respectively. So again, Mercyhurst for some non-conference action. The following week, the Huskies get into WCHA play. They've got 3 WCHA conference, the 13th, 14th, and 17th. That's Friday, Saturday, and Tuesday. Bemidji State on the weekend, Minnesota at Ritter Arena that Tuesday, before coming back the following weekend. So a pretty tough slate. You've got 5 games within the span of a week and change. So then they play Northeastern, either Lindenwood or Sacred Heart in that non-conference tournament that Friday, Saturday. So before back into WCHA action, they play Mankato to round out the month of October. So a pretty tough gauntlet of games in terms of a mix of scheduling crammed in there for the month of October. Then it is only 4 contests for the Huskies in November. They have a week off, 2 weeks off in the middle of that, actually, during the holidays and in the middle. So they play Wisconsin, week off, and then home and home with St. Thomas before another week off during Thanksgiving, which is really nice. Traditionally, the Huskies have played on Thanksgiving. It's kind of nice to see them get that off for the holiday. And then it's Ohio State, Minnesota on a Tuesday, and then Duluth Friday, Saturday to round out their first half schedule. That is a tough week and a half in December to finish out your first half. The St. Cloud team, they definitely have tests as far as trying to stay fresh, trying to stay healthy. I would not be shocked to see players who are on the outside looking in jump into the lineup and see a pretty healthy cast and rotation of players. First half schedule, Nick, what do you pull from it?
Get ready to get tested early, right?
Yeah.
And that's good. I think from what I saw, again, just a couple of weeks ago against Union, this team's ready for it. Obviously, it's kind of almost sucks that when you outscore your opponent 10-1 that you have to have a week off, right? Because I think, the instinct as a player and a coach is you want to keep the momentum going. But at the same time, time to go back on some film and maybe spend some extra time with cleaning up some of those details that he mentioned, especially defensively, even though, again, 1 goal against, but there was some sloppy play at times, and it happens. Again, it's their first weekend of hockey. But again, after Mercyhurst, you get right into the thick of it, right? So I think at the end of it, you get Minnesota early. It's going to be a good early test for this squad to see where they're at. I expect that to be an absolute barn burner. I really do. I think that's going to be a very exciting game for not just Huskies fans, for college hockey women's fans. I really do. And then the icebreaker tournament, always kind of fun to do something like that. And then again, you get right back into the WCHA, right? Mankato, Wisconsin, St. Thomas. It's actually going to be tough in November because you're, week on, week off. Granted, this holidays you do, but that's tough, right? To kind of sustain maybe some of the things you're trying to work on, sustain momentum. And I get momentum sort of a hyperbole to a degree, but if you're playing well, you want to keep playing. So that's going to be kind of I think the tougher test is how do you balance the time off and then being able to jump right back on the ice and complete at a high level with, without looking like you've lost a step. So it's going to be a tough schedule in November.
Yeah, it's tough though, because you have Bemidji State, you travel to Minnesota on a Tuesday, and then I would say probably that Wednesday or maybe Thursday you're on an airplane because that icebreaker tournament is at Martire Family Arena in Connecticut. So you're playing Friday, Saturday, then you come back and you have to play Mankato and Wisconsin back to back. So I think that first grouping, that week off, will be nice. St. Thomas hopefully should be a test that the Huskies should be able to handle. And then you get another week off during the holidays, like you said before. You take on Ohio State, the Gophers again, and then Duluth. So second half, a little more traditional. So if you can get through December, I think that you set yourself up well for a good second half. 6 games in the month of January, 8 in the month of February. So the Huskies do not return to action until school basically starts, so to speak. Actually, they are off from December 9th until January 12th. That's going to be interesting. They open up with Mankato at home and home against St. Thomas, and then they stay at home for Ohio State before they finish with 7 of 8 on the road to finish their schedule here, Nick. Wisconsin on the road, Minnesota at home, and then on the road for that home and home weekend against the Gophers, and then on the road for 4 straight after against Duluth and Bemidji to round out the season. I would say, if you want me to be honest, in a non-homerism perspective, this is one of the tougher schedules in the WCHA.
It is. That's tough.
This St. Cloud team, I guess to kind of roll 2 questions into one like we normally do, second half is tough.
Like you do, not me.
Well, tell me what you think about it. And overall, over the course of the season, St. Cloud, how do they handle the WCHA? How do they take on this season?
Well, like you do, right? Let's do the coach's cliche answer day by day. Honestly, though, because you talk about that stretch early, right? When you got to go to Bemidji on the weekend, you get a day off, essentially, maybe. And then you're going into Tuesday to face the Gophers, and then you're traveling to face 2, important non-conference games out east in an in a tournament, right? So at the end of it, and then you go right back to action after a weekend. So you have to take it day by day, right? And I think under the Idalski leadership, we've seen this from last year that this team is going to be well prepared. They're going to be taking care of themselves. They're going to be up to speed on game film. I think they're going to do all right, if I'm going to be honest with you. I really do. And how do they handle it? Honestly, if I'm the Huskies and I'm in that locker room, go on there and go and take it. I know it sounds like simple, but again, this program, I still think there's a little bit of a cloud. I say very little, that you're sort of, the underdog. And to a degree, I think there's some truth to that. But I think now it's like, I think you've got some weight to your feet now. I think you do have a stronger punch, right? So if you're going to go into the gauntlet of the Wisconsins, the Minnesotas, the Ohio States, right, even to Duluth for that matter, you have to go in with the confidence that not only can you hang, you can beat these teams, right? I think the mental part of this season is going to be the big test for them, just as we talked about on the men's side with Chris Mayotte, right? So I think the opportunity is there for them. If they can just believe in their game, go out there and execute, again, still be staunch defensively, and then deploy what is a very much improved and much deeper offensive attack, the opportunity is there. The skill is there. You got to go out there and do it. And I do think this team, if they just commit to that and just, again, feel like they can do it, they can really turn some heads again this year.
And they've got options too, both forward and defensively, and even goaltending wise, if you want to be even more specific. This team finally has what I would say, this is probably on paper, at least, the deepest St. Cloud women's team we have seen in maybe half a decade. Yeah.
Oh, longer than that.
Yeah, maybe even a decade. The teams of the late 2000s, early 2010s were pretty good. And I think that if you're getting back to that relevance, and if this freshman class can replicate what Clara Himlarova's group did when we were there together at St. Cloud State, one of the best, if not the best freshman classes in terms of production and program history, this is going to be an exciting road for the St. Cloud women's hockey team. I cannot wait. It's going to be a fantastic season. Like we said, back in action this week against Mercyhurst. Speaking of schedules and all things day by day, the Huskies Warming House podcast is brought to you by the Soda Pod. Stay wild and up to date with all things in the state of hockey. CenterISU.com, there to cover it all. Huskies Illustrated as well, your home for all things St. Cloud hockey related, including latest news and photos of your favorite Huskies. So like we mentioned, you have this St. Cloud women's team that is back in action against Mercyhurst before getting into WCHA action. And then St. Cloud, we start to preview the men's team here. They, just like the women's team, will have 2 games under their belt, respectively. And the men's hockey team will play St. Thomas on the 7th and 8th. So again, the women play Friday, Saturday against Mercyhurst in Mercyhurst. Men's team plays Saturday, Sunday against St. Thomas this upcoming weekend. So hockey is back in the Granite City. The men's team will get a recap, as will the women's team next week, and the men's team will get their NCHC preview, our 16th and final one, and hockey season is officially rolling. Like we mentioned, yeah, no kidding. I'll be honest. Tuesday releases from here on out. 16 previews is a lot. I think between Nick and I talking about this, and obviously some of the scheduling things that we had to do. It's a lot. It's a lot to break down every team, and I think we would be lying if we, Nick. I think I probably speak for you here in this sense. We'd be lying if we said that we weren't a little tired from previewing these teams. It's a lot to dive into both the St. Cloud teams. To add 14 others on top of that is,
well, there's just so much unknowns, right? At the end of the day, even with the teams that, we would like to think we know a little bit more ins and the outs than the others. But at the end of it, trying to balance that with everything else we got going on, and, outside the microphones and the webcams or in Kayla JP bodies, like a screenshot. I wish that I could absolutely burn to smithereens and hell and back. But anyway, it's good, and more so that now hockey is back, right? So the previews are done. Let's actually get the puck down and let's play some freaking hockey, man.
Yeah, this is my favorite time of year, the kind of the foreboding that is the hockey season right around the corner. Like we said, last preview for the NCHA next week, and then after that, it'll basically be women's recap and men's recap from here on out when we go through our weekly shows. So we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of the weekends for both teams and get to talk real in-depth just about basically 4 games of hockey or less each weekend. And I think that that's really exciting to really kind of get back to our roots a little bit and dive into the nitty gritty ins and outs, night in and night out, weekend in and weekend out for both of these squads. And I'm really excited for it. Nick, but this St. Cloud women's team, it's going to be a really exciting ride for this program. Anything else you want to add for this group before we head on our way here?
Go watch the team. Go to the Herb.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The attendance needs to get up. The fact that this program on the women's side doesn't get at minimum, a 4-digit number, 1,000 or better in the seats every night at the Herbert National Hockey Center.
I think they will this year. I think, give it, some time. I think there's going to be a genuine buzz around this team this year. I hate to say it, but, there's a really good reason now for him to go. So students themselves, again, if you're out there, the men's team is fun to watch, but this women's team, I'm telling you, they're going to be just as fun to watch. They are primed for one hell of a season. Go out there and show your support. This team needs you at the Herbert National Hockey Center.
Absolutely would agree. As players ourselves, we can attest when you have a rockin' building, it's much easier to play, and the advantage definitely goes to the home team. The Huskies could definitely use that. For Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the den.
And your one-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.